The sun never quite made it to the deepest valleys in the dragon realm. Their wedge-at cliffs rose like the ribs of some ancient beast. A narrow footpath led down to a cave that only a few servants know about. Lyra walks slowly down that path, her simple wool cloak pulling at her shoulders as if it were a heavy secret that could cost her life. For 3 of her 19 years, Lyra worked as a kitchen maid in the fortress of Embercrest, which had walls made of obsidian. She wasn't brave or stupid. She usually rebelled by sneaking an extra berry tart when the cooks weren't looking. But tonight she had a bundle wrapped in warm linen that was moving. There was a soft, squeaky trill coming from inside. Lyra pushed the cloth closer to her chest. "Shh, little one," she said in a whisper, her breath freezing in the cold. "You'll wake up the guards at night." She had been sweeping ashes near the royal hatchery just a week ago when the ground shook with a soundless boom. One of the big stone eggs had broken too soon, and there was a thin crack running through its marbled surface. The Dragon Queen had gone to a council meeting, leaving her attendants arguing over who should get a healer. Before anyone could do anything, the egg cracked open and a tiny snout came out, making a sound so sad that it broke Lyra's heart. The attendants had pulled back in disgust. "Too small," one of them said. "A runt. It won't last the hour." Someone else had already grabbed the tongs used to throw away weak hatchlings. Something inside Lyra had flared up. Maybe the same quiet stubbornness that made her sing in the dark kitchens. She quickly picked up the shaking creature and ran away, her heart racing more than the war drums at the fire festival. Now she went into the cave where she had hidden some old copper pots and pieces of hay. She put the bundle down and took off the linen. Two bright amber eyes blinked at her. The scales of the baby animal shone a faint green, like sunlight shining through leaves in the forest. Its little wings moved, letting out a puff of warm smoke. "There you are, Ember," Lyra whispered, using the name she had chosen during sleepless nights. "Safe again." The baby bird chirped and poked her thumb with its wet nose. He eagerly drank the goat's milk she gave him in a shallow bowl that she had stolen from the castle pantry every day. But the milk wasn't enough. His stomach growled with hunger that made something deep inside Lyra stir. The wind howled outside the cave that first night, and she made a choice that was both reckless and strangely natural. She untied the laces on her tunic and, with her heart racing, pulled the little dragon to her chest. Ember latched on without thinking, and even though her teeth were starting to grow, she was warm and strangely gentle. A wave of heat went through her, not in a bad way, more like holding a live ember in her chest. She leaned back against the stone wall after that, feeling both ashamed and happy. "Well," she whispered to the sleepy baby bird, "you and I are really bound now." Weeks went by in a secret rhythm. Lyra got up before dawn to take care of Ember, and then went back to work with the other servants. She learned how to steal bits of meat, hide the smell of smoke that stuck to her hair, and sing lullabies to calm the restless dragon. Ember grew quickly, every day. His wings got bigger and his eyes got sharper, which scared her because he was so smart. By the 3rd week, he was copying sounds, like her laugh, the sound of water dripping from the cave ceiling, and even parts of words. "Lyra," he croaked one night as he turned his head. She almost dropped the bucket of water. "Did you?" "No, not possible." But he had a knowing look in his eyes. At times, she thought he could read her mind. He would fix her with that molten stare, and she would tell him things she had never been brave enough to say out loud. How she wanted to be free beyond the fortress gates. How the queen's cruelty weighed on every servant like an iron collar. And how the sky beyond the peaks must taste like adventure. Ember listened, and his tail curled around her ankles as if to promise her something she couldn't yet name. People in the castle started to hear rumors about a missing baby bird. The queen herself offered a reward for information, and guards searched every room. Every time a patrol went by the cave entrance, Lyra's heart raced. But Ember wasn't the weak little runt they thought she was. His scales turned into a shiny emerald, and sparks flew from his teeth when he yawned. He followed Lyra in a very sneaky way, learning how to stay in the shadows. One night when there was no moon, he spoke again, this time more clearly. "Lyra, stay." The one word stopped her. "Are you able to talk?" He blinked slowly and said again, "Stay. Lyra, stay." Tears filled her eyes fear. "Oh, and something else." "I am here," she said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." There was a low thrumming sound in the cave that she could feel in her bones. Ember's eyes got brighter, and she could feel his mind brushing against hers, curious, eager, and impossibly smart. She saw flashes of things like flying over mountains, fire falling from the sky, and a throne made of black crystal. She was always next to him in her visions. Lyra staggered back, out of breath. "What are you turning into?" Ember just blinked, and smoke came out of his nose like an answer that didn't need to be said. Months turned into years. The Queen's searches became more and more desperate. Dragons were the source of her power, and losing even one hatchling hurt her pride. Workers at the fortress were unhappy because they had to pay more taxes and face harsher punishments. From the kitchens, Lyra saw soldiers drag people who disagreed with them to the dungeons. She knew things would be worse for them if Ember was found, but she couldn't lie to herself. The baby she had once cared for was no longer small. He filled the cave now, and his wings brushed the ceiling. She felt a heartbeat strong enough to shake stone when she put her hand on his warm scales. "You are amazing," she said one night, her voice full of fear and awe. Ember lowered his huge head until his golden eyes met hers. "Lyra mine," he said, his voice a deep rumble that echoed through the room. The words made her feel a strange warmth in her chest, half fear and half excitement. She understood that their connection, sealed in milk, secrecy, and whispered dreams, had become something strong, maybe even unbreakable. Storm clouds were gathering over Embercrest. The young dragon opened his wings inside the cave. Each movement was a silent promise of the fire to come. The storms that formed over Embercrest didn't stop for 3 days. Thunder rumbled over the jagged peaks like the footsteps of a god who couldn't sit still, and lightning stitched white scars into the sky. Lyra worked in the big kitchen like nothing was wrong, but every time there was a crash of thunder, she jumped. She was thinking about Ember and the cave. Every night, she snuck out with a basket of stolen food, pretending to be picking herbs in the outer gardens. Every night, she found the young dragon waiting for her, bigger and more beautiful than the night before. His emerald scales now sparkled with a faint inner light, as if they were the storm itself. "Are you hungry again?" she teased one night as she offered him a piece of venison. Ember sniffed the meat and then pushed it aside with his nose. "What's wrong? You really like venison?" The dragon's eyes, which were gold, met hers. "Not enough." Lyra's breath stopped. His voice had changed since she last heard it. It was no longer a shaky imitation of human speech. It was now a low, deep growl that seemed to shake her bones. "Not enough for what?" she asked. "Strength," Ember said in a low voice. "Flight, fire, in a little while." She felt a chill run down her back. "Why soon?" He didn't respond. Instead, he opened his wings, which were now wide enough to fill half the cave. The wind blew through the room, sending embers flying from the brazier and tossing Lyra's hair across her face. She took a step back, her heart racing. For the first time, she felt the full power of the creature she had cared for, a power that might not stay hidden for long. The patrols of the Queen got bolder. Soldiers looked through every stable and storage room, even the rooms where the servants slept. People said that the Queen herself had started a blood magic scrying to find the lost hatchling. Lyra kept her head down, but every day she felt the net getting tighter. One night, while she was cleaning pots, she heard two guards talking softly by the pantry door. Another village didn't want to pay the dragon tithe. One said, "The queen set it on fire herself. The people are scared," said the other. "They say a storm is coming that even she can't control." Lyra took a deep breath. Maybe they were talking about the actual storm that was going on outside. But the way they spoke made her think of another threat that she was both afraid of and loved. When Lyra got to the cave later that night, Ember was waiting at the door instead of in his usual nest. The moonlight made his scales look like emerald flames that changed shape. He bent down and let his breath wash over her. He said softly, "You hide. Why?" She whispered, "You know why? They'll kill you if they find you, and me." "They can't." His tail hit the ground and broke the stone. "I am more than they think. I believe you," she said, her voice shaking. "But please, don't make them angry. They'll set the world on fire to find you." Ember's eyes shone like gold that had melted. "Then we burn first." The words took her breath away. "Ember, I see it," he said, his voice deep and hypnotic. "I see their fortress fall. I see you next to me, with fire on your head." Lyra fell back. "Put a crown on it. I'm not a queen," he said simply. "You will be. We are bound. I rise, you rise." She wanted to fight him and laugh it off as a dragon's strange fantasy, but the cave seemed to pulse with his confidence. A part of her, one that had always wanted more than to be a servant, thumped back. Days turned into a tense rhythm. Lyra worked for the queen, who was always watching her, and she kept Ember's secret like a live coal in her chest. Every rumor of rebellion that was whispered felt like a warning. Every time armor clanged in the hallways, her heart raced. While delivering bread to the upper halls one afternoon, she came across a scene that made her blood run cold. The dragon queen stood in front of a circle of blackened candles, her jeweled claws moving through the air to make shapes. There was a red glow under her skin, like fire trapped in glass. The queen hissed, "Show me," to the forces she couldn't see. "Show me the flame's lost child." The flames of the candles jumped up to the ceiling. A flash of green light appeared in the air, a color Lyra knew all too well. She ran away before the queen turned. That night, her heart raced as she ran to the cave. "She's looking for you," she said in a gasp. "She almost found you." Ember was quiet and still as she listened. He then said, "Now is the time." "Time for what?" "Time to go. Time to fight. Battle the queen." Lyra's voice broke. "That's crazy." "She is crazy," Ember said, his voice sounding like thunder from a long way away. "She rules with fear and fire. I am fire that has no limits." Lyra looked into his burning eyes and saw those strange visions again. Mountains on fire, the fortress falling apart, and herself standing next to him with a crown of molten gold on her head. A dangerous, exciting idea took hold. The storm finally ended the next night. The rain hit the fortress hard, drowning out the sound of Ember's powerful wings as he followed Lyra across the dark sky for the first time. She held onto the ridge of his back, and her cloak stuck to her skin. Every time his wings flapped, she felt a jolt of fear and excitement. They flew high above the sleeping villages, where their torches looked like tiny dots. Ember breathed out a stream of fire into the storm, and lightning struck back, tearing the clouds apart with a loud noise. The wind took away the sound of Lyra's laughter. For a brief time, she felt free. Ember lowered his head so she could slide to the ground when they landed in a faraway meadow. "You are not scared," he said. "I should be," she said, out of breath. "But not with you." He looked at her for a long time, his eyes shining like the sun's. He said, "We change everything together." The words hit her like a promise and a warning. The queen's anger grew as she returned to the fortress. Patrols disappeared into the storm, looking for the strange green flame that villagers said they saw streaking across the sky. Lyra went back to work, but her secret heart was on fire with every memory of the flight. But one night, while she was cleaning the kitchen floor, she saw a shadow in the doorway. There stood Captain Kale, the Queen's most feared soldier. His black armor was wet from the rain. He said, "You," and his eyes narrowed. "The girl in the kitchen. Come." Lyra's stomach turned. "Yes, Captain. The Queen needs your help in the High Hall. Now." Her thoughts were racing. Did the Queen see her in a dream? Did someone follow her? She dried her hands, which made her voice steady. Of course, the High Hall smelled like smoke and lightning. The Dragon Queen sat on her black throne, and her eyes were like two fires. "Lyra," she said in a soft, deadly voice, "you spend a lot of time outside the walls." Lyra bowed low, her heart racing. "I gather herbs for the kitchens, Your Majesty." Herbs. The Queen's smile was sharp. "Do herbs help you fly?" Lyra's breath stopped. She made herself look down. "I don't get it." The Queen got up, and her jeweled cloak crackled with heat. "Don't lie. The sky itself whispers of a green flame, and I can smell its smoke on you." The hall shook before Lyra could answer. A loud roar echoed through the stone, so loud that tapestries ripped off the walls. Guards ran round, yelling in fear. The Queen's eyes got bigger, not because she was scared, but because she was angry. "He comes." Outside, a huge shape with wings like thunderclouds blocked the moon. Ember came down in a swirl of green fire, and his roar shook the fortress to its core. As soldiers ran away, the courtyard turned into a mess. The Queen walked to the balcony with flames wrapping round her fists. "Come out, hatchling." Ember hit the ground hard enough to break the flagstones, and his eyes were like molten gold. "Mother," he said in a deep voice, as if to say, "I'm going to kill you." People in the crowd gasped. Lyra stood still in the hall, torn between fear and a strong, undeniable pride. The Queen raised her hands, and fire swirled round them. "You dare to go against me?" Ember yelled. "I am not yours. I am ours, through the smoke and chaos." His eyes found Lyra steady and unbreakable. "Lyra," he yelled, his voice like a storm. "Come." Before her mind could catch up, something inside her answered. She moved forward, and the world shrank to the space between them. Ember's roar echoed through the fortress, making the High Hall shake like it was alive. The black vaulted ceiling let dust fall, and the Queen's braziers flickered green in response. Lyra's heart raced, so fast that she thought everyone in the court could hear it. "Come." Ember called again, and his voice was so loud that it shook the stained glass windows. Lyra felt like the Queen's gaze was burning her like a brand. "Don't move, girl," she said with a hiss. "That thing is a weapon that has gone crazy. He will eat you just like he will eat me." But Lyra didn't hear the Queen's voice as a command anymore. Instead, she felt a steady pull in her chest, like an invisible string that connected her to the dragon she had raised, fed and loved. She moved forward. Guards charged with raised spears. Ember let out a single burst of green flame. The air caught fire, melting metal into molten slag. The guards stepped back, their shields smoking. Lyra got to the balcony, where the storm's rain was cold against her face. Ember crouched on the broken courtyard below, his wings covering him like a shield. He lowered his huge head until their golden eyes met. "Lyra," he said, his voice softer now. "Ride." She paused for a heartbeat. Climbing on his back meant giving up everything she had known. The kitchens, the servants who shared scraps of laughter, and the fragile safety of being obedient. But behind her was the Queen, whose rule was full of fear and fire. Lyra took a shaky breath and jumped. Ember's warm scales felt like home to her. As soon as she sat down, he shot up into the sky, and the wind ripped the screams of the fortress into pieces. As they climbed into the storm, the rain hit her face hard. The black spires of Embercrest below sparkled like shattered glass. Lightning danced on Ember's wings, leaving lines of green fire on his scales. Lyra pressed against his neck, and excitement and fear mixed together. "They will hunt us," she yelled over the wind. "They can't cage the storm," Ember said, his voice shaking her bones. "But we have to kill the queen, or her chains will come after us." Lyra thought about the queen's red eyes, which the villagers said were burned because they were defiant. "How?" she asked. Ember said, "We face her together." They both felt a shiver of understanding, more than words, a shared vision. She saw the fortress on fire, but she also saw a new throne, a kingdom where dragons and people lived together. She didn't see herself as a servant. She saw herself as something much bigger. They came back before dawn, and the storm's rage hid their approach. Ember landed on the outer walls with a loud grace. The queen stood in the main courtyard, her red cloak swirling round her. She looked too tall to be real, like a shadow of anger against the dying storm. "So," the queen said, her voice echoing off the stones, "the lost hatchling comes back with his pet." Lyra slid off Ember's back, and her boots hit the wet stone. "I'm not anyone's pet," she said, surprised at how steady her voice was. The queen laughed, which sounded like ice-breaking. "Those are strong words for a maid who stole from me." Ember moved forward, and the air around her shimmered with heat. "I was never yours. You wanted power, not life. You would have thrown me away like trash." The queen said, "You are a dragon of my blood. Your flame is my flame." "No," Ember said in a low voice. "My flame is ours." The queen's eyes got smaller. "Then burn." When she raised her hands, a wall of red fire rushed toward them. Lyra flinched back because the heat was too much. But Ember spread his wings, and the emerald flames met the queen's red in a deafening roar. The two fires hit each other, and sparks flew like stars. The courtyard shook, and the stones broke under their feet. Lightning split the storm, drawn to the clash of power. Ember stood up and roared, shaking the heavens with his challenge. The queen screamed in rage, and her body was covered in flames. The invisible rope that held Lyra felt like it was pulling tighter than ever. She stepped forward without thinking and put a hand on Ember's hot scales. A wave of heat went through her, waking her up but not burning her. She could suddenly see the world through Ember's eyes. Every flicker of flame, every swirl of heat, and every heartbeat in the walls of the fortress. "Lyra," Ember's voice rang in her head. "You are the fire with me." She got it. Their connection was more than love. It was power. They were something new together, something the queen could never control. Lyra raised her other hand. Emerald light burst from her palm, just like Ember's fire. The soldiers round them gasped. The queen's eyes got bigger in shock and then smaller in anger. "Not possible. Nothing is impossible," Lyra said, her voice ringing like a bell. "Not anymore." The queen hit them again, this time with a spear of red flame. Lyra held up her glowing hand. Emerald fire blossomed outward, meeting the attack head-on. The red and green flames twisted together until the courtyard looked like a second sun. Ember jumped, and her claws hit the stone with a crack that split the ground. He lunged at the queen, and their fires danced together in a furious way. Lyra felt every movement like her own heartbeat, every wing beat and every burst of flame. Finally, Ember's roar was louder than the queen's scream. A flash of green fire surrounded her, bright and scary. The queen lay still when the light went out, and her crown melted into the stone. The courtyard was quiet, except for the sound of the rocks cooling down. The soldiers, shocked and scared, fell to their knees. One by one, voices rose, not in anger but in awe. Someone said, "Long live the dragon of emerald flame." Lyra looked at Ember, then at the queen's body on the ground. "It's over. she said in a soft voice. Ember bent down, so that his big head was level with hers. He said, "It starts." The sky turned pink and gold as dawn broke. There was smoke coming from the tops of the fortress, but no alarm went off. Instead, a strange calm came over the place, as if everyone were waiting. Lyra stood in the big hall where the queen had ruled, with the melted crown at her feet. The soldiers and servants stood still, all looking at her. Their questions felt like a heavy weight on her. Who would be in charge of them now? Ember came in, and the sunlight hit his green scales. "They look to you," he said. "I'm just a servant," she said softly. Ember said, "You are more. You cared when no one else did. You made life. You gave me everything. Now we return it to them." Lyra bent down and picked up the crown that had melted. It was heavy, misshapen, and still had some magic in it. She slowly put it on her head. A murmur spread through the crowd and turned into a chant. "Queen Lyra, Queen Lyra." She looked Ember in the eye. "I never wanted a throne, and yet," he said, his golden eyes shining with pride, "it fits." After a few weeks, the world started to change. Taxes went up, dungeons were emptied, and villages that had been burned down by fear were rebuilt under new skies. Dragons flew freely, no longer tools of oppression, but allies in making the world a better place. Lyra didn't rule with iron or fire. She ruled with the quiet strength that had saved a tiny hatchling. Every night, Ember and she flew beyond the mountains, where the winds smelled like freedom and stars. He would sometimes look back at her and say, in that deep rumble that still made her feel warm all over, Oz, and every time, she would smile at the endless sky and say, Oz. For 100 years, the dragon realm had not been quiet. There had been an endless echo of screams, war drums, and the sound of fire eating up fields during the queen's rule. But now, for the first time, mornings were only filled with birds singing and the sound of rivers rushing far away. Lyra looked out over the valleys from the high balcony of Embercrest, which was no longer a fortress but a palace reborn. Where there used to be smoke, there were now flags. The villagers painted them with simple shapes like open hands, flowers, and most often, emerald wings. She should have been at peace, and in a way, she did. But she was learning that peace came with its own problems. The big doors behind her creaked open. Ember walked in, and his claws made a soft clicking sound on the stone floor. He had grown so big that he could fill the room, but he moved with care. His eyes, which were like molten metal, looked at her. "You don't sleep," he said in a deep voice. Lyra smiled a little. "Queens don't do that very often. Queens should." He bent down so that his warm breath touched her cheek. "Dreams give you more than battles," she said. "I don't dream much anymore. Too many choices. There are too many voices in my head." Ember looked at her for a long time. "Then you ride tonight. No crown, no council, only wind." Her smile got bigger and softer. "You make it sound so easy." "Yes," he said. "We're not complicated." He flicked his tail toward the faraway village and said, "They are complicated." Lyra chuckled softly. "You are smarter than most people I've met," Ember said. "Iron Dragon," as if that explained everything. Life under their rule wasn't always easy. After the queen died, old clan rivalries came back. Farmers fought over rivers, and merchants wanted protection from bandits who felt stronger because of the new order. Lyra listened to each request, but her patience was running out. She wouldn't rule like the queen did, with fear and fire. Instead, she held meetings in the open square where people could talk freely. At first, they whispered and swore, but soon their voices got louder with hope. "She listens," they said. "Not like the queen. She walks among us without any guards. She brings the dragon. But he doesn't burn. He blesses. Lyra would always remember the first time Ember bent down in the village square so kids could touch his scales. Their laughter rang out like bells, bright and fearless. For a lot of people, it was the first time they had ever seen a dragon that wasn't a weapon. But peace was not strong. One night, a group of nobles from the eastern hills came to visit. They bowed to Lyra, but their smiles were weak. Their spokesman said, "You are young, Majesty," his rings shining. "And once, you were just a servant. Can you really make people loyal?" Lyra's fingers curled around the arm of her throne. "Being loyal is not a command. It is given, and I will earn it." The noble's smile got sharper. "And what if the dragon comes after you? What happens next?" A low growl echoed through the hall before Lyra could answer. Ember, who had been watching from the shadows, stepped forward. His golden eyes held the noble still like an insect. "She fed me when your queen would have thrown me away," Ember said, and the earth shook with each word. "She is not a servant. She is fire." The noble turned pale and bowed quickly. "Of course, I'm sorry." Lyra sighed after they ran off. "You scare them. They should be scared," Ember said. "Not of me, but of what they were." She touched his warm scales. "Fear can't build a kingdom, though. We need something more powerful. What is stronger than fire?" Lyra looked him in the eye. "Love, trust, hope." Ember turned his head as if he were tasting the words. "These aren't dragon things. They are now," she said firmly. "The seasons changed. The valleys turned green in the spring, and the mountains turned gold in the summer. Where there used to be ash, crops grew well. Festivals came back with music, dancing, and fires that burned for fun, not war." Lyra walked among her people as one of them, not as a distant queen. She wore simple dresses and left her crown behind most of the time. She tried their bread, blessed their kids, and learned their songs. Still, she went back to the palace at night, tired and unsure. One night, while they were watching fireflies rise from the fields, she asked Ember, "Do they really believe in me?" Ember said, "They believe in us. You gave them a voice. I gave them the sky." Lyra rested against his warm side, and the stars shone in her eyes. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd let you die in that hatchery," Ember said. "Then the world would be ash, and I would never have known song, milk, or Lyra." She laughed quietly, and her eyes were watery. "You're not supposed to be sentimental," he said again. "I am dragon." But this time, his voice was softer, like a person. "Some nights were not easy. Once, raiders from beyond the mountains tried to cross the borders because they thought the new queen was weak." Lyra stood on the ramparts as Ember's roar ripped through the sky, sending the attackers flying like leaves in a storm. Ember turned to Lyra after the villagers cheered. "They will always put you to the test. Always, I know," she said. "But as long as they see us together, they'll think again." Ember's eyes shone. "Together is stronger." Years began to weave their quiet tapestry. Lyra became queen not because of jewels or laws, but because her people believed in her. Ember also grew, as big as the tops of mountains, and his wings cast shadows over whole valleys. But when he bent down next to her, she still saw the baby bird she had held in the fold of her cloak, shaking and hungry. When the night was really quiet, she would sometimes rest her head on his scales and whisper, "We're still us, aren't we?" And Ember always answered in that deep rumble that had brought them together from the start. No matter how big or powerful he had become, us. It had been 3 years since the Dragon Queen fell. The Dragon Realm, which used to be full of fear, now had a quiet strength. Under the sun, fields rippled with gold, villages hummed with music, and kids laughed as emerald-winged dragons flew freely in the sky. Lyra looked like she had always had her crown. She didn't rule from a cold throne. She ruled from the village squares, the mountain pots, and the busy markets. But peace was never still. It needed constant care, just like the hearth fires she used to stoke as a servant. Doubtful seeds Lyra called a council to order in the great hall on a cool full morning. The room was full of farmers, merchants, and dragon keepers, and their voices were a mix of excitement and tension. A merchant opened a map and said, "We need more bridges. Business is great. But there aren't enough river crossings and more schools," a healer said. "Kids learn letters now, but we don't have enough teachers to teach them all." Some people were worried that dragon flights would scare herds, or that it would be too expensive to fix the roads. Lyra listened, her hand raised, and then she spoke. She said, "All these needs are important, but the way we decide is also important. Fear no longer controls us. Humans and dragons will build together." Everyone in the room agreed, but a tall man by the door crossed his arms. "It's easy to talk about unity when you're sitting next to a dragon," he said, pointing to Ember, who was sitting outside the hall like a living emerald statue. "But some people are still afraid of them. We remember the fires of the Queen." Lyra looked him straight in the eye. "And that's why we show them a different way. We are not chained by dragons. They're our friends." Outside, Ember's golden eyes shone in quiet support. The man bowed his head, ashamed, but Lyra knew the doubt would stay. Words alone weren't enough for peace. Bonds in the air that night. She went up to the top of the palace's wind-swept tower with Ember. The sun setting made his scales glow like molten metal. "You heard the merchant," she said. "Some hearts still hold onto old fears." Ember turned his huge head to look at her. "Fear is like a slow fire, but we are patient." Lyra said softly, "I want them to see what I see when I look at you. Strength without being mean. Power that keeps you safe." "Then let them ride the wind," Ember said. She moved her head. "A flight for the festival." "Yes," he said in a simple way. "People and dragons together. Up in the clouds." Lyra smiled. She thought about the Festival of Wings. It could change everything. The Wings Festival weeks later. The realm came together on the wide meadow that lay beyond the mountains. Dragons of all colors, sapphire, amber, and obsidian came in big, sweeping arcs. People from faraway valleys came, their eyes wide with awe. For a lot of people, this was the first time they got close to a dragon without being scared. Ember bent down so kids could climb on his huge front leg. Other dragons came after, curious and calm. When Lyra gave the signal, the dragons flew up into the sky, each with a willing rider. People and dragons rose together, their emerald, gold, and midnight wings painting the sky. People gasped and cheered. Lyra was in the middle of the formation on Ember. The wind blew by, cool and clean. The land below looked like a living map, with villages, rivers, and forests. People everywhere were looking up in awe, not fear. As soon as they landed at sunset, the meadow came alive with music. People and dragons danced round big fires. Kids braided flowers into the crests of dragons, and the dragons sang deep, resonant songs that shook the ground. Lyra looked round and felt sure in her heart that this was the future she had always wanted. Quiet thoughts later, Lyra and Ember lay down at the edge of the meadow under a sky full of stars. The firelight danced across his green scales. She said, "You were right. Fear lost another piece of itself today." Ember's golden eyes became less harsh. "You lead them well." Lyra rested against his warm side. "Sometimes I wonder if I lead anyone or if we're just walking the same path together." Ember said, "We have a way." You and I, they sat together in silence, listening to the music of the night. Lyra thought about the years to come. More schools, bridges, and festivals of unity. Work that never ends, but also joy that never ends. Tomorrow's shadows a cool wind blew as the last flames of the bonfires died down. Lyra looked up and saw Ember looking at the horizon. "What is it?" she asked. He said, "The world is big. Other worlds breathe beyond these mountains. Some people will hear about us. Some will come. Do you think they will be happy to see us? Some will. Some won't. His tail moved back and forth on the grass. But we're ready. Lyra put her hand on his warm scales. Then we'll meet them together. No matter what. Yes, Ember said. And the word was a deep, resonant promise. The meadow got quiet, but there was no fear in the silence. Instead, there was the steady heartbeat of a kingdom finally learning to live together. 25 years after the first Festival of Wings, the dragon realm shone in the light of a silver dawn. Rivers flowed clearly through rich valleys, and dragons carried people and goods along the busy skyways. There was now a rhythm of shared life where there had once been fear. Queen Lyra stood on the balcony of the palace, and a light breeze blew through her grey hair. She didn't wear a crown, because people had long since stopped needing one to remember who she was. The royal gardens behind her were alive with the sounds of early birds singing and kids laughing as they chased each other between rows of golden lilies. An empire of peace the realm had turned into a tapestry of lives that were all connected. Stone bridges crossed rivers where merchants from faraway places sold spices and silk. Dragon schools, which were only half open to the sky, taught both types of dragons at the same time. People used to sing songs softly around campfires, but now they were sung in huge amphitheaters where dragons' deep harmonics mixed with human voices. Lyra often walked among her people, listening more than talking. One day, an old farmer said to her, "You gave us back the sky, not just the dragons, but the sky in our own hearts." She smiled, feeling both warm and humble. She said, "The sky was always yours. We only remembered together." Ember's slow twilight ember still looked like a living emerald, but his flight had slowed down. He would lie down near the palace gardens on quiet nights, with his eyes half closed and a soft plume of smoke coming from his nose as he dreamed. One night, Lyra sat next to him, and the moonlight made his scales look pale silver. She said softly, "You're tired." His voice was still deep when he said, "I am older. Dragons live a long time, but time touches us too." Lyra touched his warm side with her hand. "I can't picture this world without your wings." He looked at her with his golden eyes. "Nor can I picture it without your heart. But we are both part of something bigger. The bond stays strong even when we're gone." There was a quiet between them that was both sad and peaceful. The last flight the next spring, the kingdom came together for what would be called the last flight. Tens of thousands of people filled the big meadow where the first Festival of Wings took place. Kids held onto blue and gold woven banners. There were dragons of every color on the hills. Lyra, who was now in her early 50s, walked up to him slowly. "One more flight?" she asked. "One more," he said. Cheers rang out from below as they rose into the sky. The wind wrapped round them, cool and full of life. They flew higher than they ever had before, until the world below was a patchwork of color and light. The sun shone on them like it was blessing their journey. They flew slowly and quietly above the clouds. Lyra could feel the strong beat of Ember's heart beneath her. It was a rhythm she had known since she was a servant girl holding a weak hatchling. The meadow went quiet when they came down. Ember bowed deeply and then opened his wings one last time. Lyra moved forward and said, "We're not honoring a queen or a dragon today. We're honoring the bond that changed us all. We all have to choose peace every day, so remember that." Her voice rang out through the crowd like a bell. People and dragons both bowed their heads, and the kingdom was still. Giving the torch, Lyra called her council together weeks later. She said, "It's time." She chose a young girl who had once ridden next to her at the Festival of Wings as the next steward of the realm. The council agreed without question. Lyra had taught them that being a leader was not like sitting on a throne. Then Lyra walked alone to the high cliffs where she and Ember had seen many sunsets together. Ember came up next to her, moving slowly but with purpose. He said, "You've made a world where neither of us is needed." She said, "That was always the dream." They sat next to each other and watched the horizon light up with the evening light. Sky and Flame's legacy, the seasons changed. Kids who used to ride dragons at festivals became scholars, farmers, and storytellers. People from faraway kingdoms came to see how humans and dragons lived together in peace. The tale of the servant girl and the baby dragon spread across the world, bringing together species that had been thought to be separate. Lyra and Emma spent their last years quietly, walking through gardens and sharing memories under the stars. For 7 days, the realm rang great bells when Ember finally folded his wings for the last time. Lyra, whose hair was now white like frost, stood in front of her people and said, "He is not gone. He is in the wind, the fire, and the sky we all share." When Lyra died peacefully a few years later, the people didn't build a marble tomb for her. Instead, they planted a huge grove of sky willows whose silver leaves shone in the sun like dragon scales. Horizon that never ends. People who visit the dragon realm still talk about the grove of sky willows hundreds of years later. When the wind blows through its branches, it makes a low, resonant sound that is like the heartbeat of a dragon and the whisper of a queen. Always there and always there. Peace is still alive there, not frozen in legend, but breathing in every child's laughter and every fight of emerald wings under the endless sky. The end.